So, what we're going to talk about today is the 10 literary guests that I would invite to a fantasy dinner party. Just for something a little bit different, a little bit silly, and hopefully a little bit fun. The idea behind this actually came from a friend of mine who sent me a letter, probably almost a month ago now. Sorry, Bianca. And in that letter, she sent me a little note with some things that she wanted me to tell her about when I responded to her, because she wants to play mail tag, which is basically just being pen pals. So she asked me for a list of 10 characters from books you've read who you'd invite to a fantasy dinner party. So I thought that it would actually be really fun to talk to you guys about that and tell you who I decided, as well as the letter that I am in the process of writing to Bianca. So now she can read it and watch it. So I hope you like that, Hank. Anyway, so it was a bit of a tricky one. I thought about lots of different people, and then I thought about whether they would make good dinner guests or not. Some of the people that I thought about but then decided against were Fforde Prefect from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because he is funny and has lots of crazy stories, but then I decided that he's actually pretty much completely insane, so probably wouldn't be that great of a dinner guest. I was considering inviting the range of different people that I was considering inviting, but I have settled on a few, and actually I need to look up the name of one of them in a book I have just here. Okay, so the first 3 characters that I decided on are Zachary Ezra Rawlins, Mirabelle, and Kat from the Starless Sea. Hello, Future Mel here. I just wanted to jump in quickly to say that it's been now probably another month since I filmed this video. As you can tell, the hair is a bit different. At the time of filming this video, I was halfway through the Starless Sea. Yes, so the comments that you're about to watch are based on being halfway through the Starless Sea, but then I have some other comments to make when you finish watching this section. So the reasons that I decided for these 3 characters were essentially the same. I think they're all really interesting characters that have really interesting perspectives on the world, really interesting lives and backstories. Zachary maybe isn't quite as gregarious as you might want from it for a dinner guest, but I think he is still someone who knows how to conduct himself quite well and be polite, and can be quite erudite once you get him going on something that he's actually interested in. So I think that he would have some really interesting insights and some really interesting thoughts to share with people at the dinner. Then I also picked Kat, also from the Starless Sea. Kat is a fairly minor character. I'm only halfway through the Starless Sea, so I'm not sure whether she turns up again at the end or whatever, but for the most part, she's only been in the beginning of the book. But even though she's a very minor character, I think that she is still really well fleshed out. She has a really interesting personality, interesting backstory. She is studying gaming at university. She seems like the kind of person who would have quite a lot to say, who would hold their own in any conversation, who probably has opinions about a number of different things. So I think she'd be a great dinner person. And Mirabelle is just really interesting. She's just a really odd character. She's quite quirky. I haven't quite figured her out yet. She would definitely, if it was a themed party, she'd definitely nail dressing up, because this is hopefully not a spoiler, but the first time that you meet her in the book, she is wearing a Max outfit from Where the Wild Things Are, which is fantastic. There's that. So those are the first 3 people that I thought of. Alright, so you finished watching what I had to say about the Starless Sea. The second half of the book sort of changed my mind about, I guess, what I was just saying. So I'm definitely still going to keep Kat, because she is very interesting and actually gets more interesting as the book progresses and has a bit more to do with the overall story. And I'm going to take Mirabelle and Zachary off. And now it's not because I don't like those characters necessarily, but I started to feel like maybe they wouldn't be as interesting to have at a dinner party, which is after all the entire point of the dinner party. So I will insert myself again later in this video to tell you who I have decided on instead. And then I decided to invite Captain Carrot and Sergeant Angua from the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett, specifically from the Watch books by Terry Pratchett in the Discworld series. I'm not sure how popular the Discworld is these days. I know there are some booktubers who love the Discworld, but I don't see a huge amount of people talking about it. But the Discworld is essentially a fantasy satirical lot of books, and the Watch books centre around the City Watch in Ankh-Morpork, which is the biggest city on the disc, and yeah, they're charged with keeping the peace. I think that all of the characters in the Watch are characters, interesting and odd, quirky individuals, but I particularly think that Carrot and Angua would be really great dinner guests because they're actually a couple. So they know each other pretty well, so they'd have someone to talk to. I think they complement each other really well, so they're very different, but I think that they both, within those differences, they complement each other really well. Angua has a really dry wit, which I find really amusing, and she's very sarcastic, which is really fun, and she has a really interesting way of looking at the world and a really interesting way of talking about the world. She's also a werewolf, so obviously she has a slightly different perspective on the world than a regular human would, and she grew up in, I can't remember what the country in the Discworld is called, but she grew up in a part of the world where vampires and werewolves and all of those sorts of paranormal creatures live, and so she has, and Ankh-Morpork isn't like that, even though many of them live there. It's more of a kind of regular Manhattan type of city. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here, but basically, yeah, she has a really different perspective on the world, and I think that would be a really interesting thing to have at a dinner party. Carrot is a very odd character as well. He's very literal. He takes things incredibly literally, and you cannot, he can't see nuance really, but that makes him actually a genuinely decent person. So he will make statements like, everybody's a good person if they just had a good opportunity, for example. And he genuinely believes that. He genuinely believes that if you give people the opportunity to be decent people, they will be decent people. And it kind of is a force by which he therefore makes people good people just by sheer force of expecting that of them, if that makes sense. And also because he believes that they are decent people so much so that you can't disappoint him, and he won't see it any other way. I don't know if I'm explaining Carrot very well, but yeah, I find him a really interesting character. And also, a lot of the time when we have dinner parties, we like to play games after dinner or before dinner, and I think that he would be the perfect person to coordinate playing the games, because in many of the books that he appears in, he is often organising like these cutthroat street gangs into football games, and you know, he makes them all give up their weapons in order to play the game, and gets these violent criminals to all play together nicely and stuff. So I think he'd corral everybody into playing the games and coordinating playing the games and being nice to each other and, you know, being civil and everything. And also, I think he would coordinate the cleanup at the end of the dinner party so that yours truly, the host, wouldn't actually have to do anything, which would be nice. So that's those two. Okay, so next I would invite Lizzie Bennet and Jane Bennet from Pride and Prejudice, because Jane's a sweetheart. She's absolutely lovely and goes out of her way to be really nice, so I think she'd be a polite, civil, friendly, kind, generous dinner party guest. And Lizzie would, I think, get along really well with Angua because she has quite a dry wit herself. She is very smart, she's very forthright, she can be very sarcastic, she's very interesting, and she's one of my all-time favourite characters, so I think that I would love to have her at a dinner party. Okay, so the next person that I have chosen is not a character or a book, a series of books, that I've heard almost anyone on BookTube talk about at all, and I only know of 2 people that I know personally who actually know this particular book series either, so bear with me. The next character that I chose was Thursday Next from the Thursday Next books, which by Jasper Fforde, which are a series of books that are the idea. It's quite a weird concept and it's a bit difficult for me to explain, partly because I haven't actually read the series for quite a while. But the idea behind the premise of the books is that the literary world is an actual world, and all of the characters, it's the whole, all the world's a stage and we are merely players. So all of the characters exist in their own lives, but they're expected to, whenever anyone's reading the book or adapting the book or doing whatever, they're expected to act out the book, but then they can live their own lives outside of that. So they go and visit each other, they hang out with each other, they're friends off stage, but whenever the book's being read, they have to go and be Elizabeth Bennet or be Jane Eyre or whatever it might be. So the literary world is a real world that exists as a parallel world to our world, which is completely different from our world. It's a total science fiction world as well, so there's layers upon layers upon layers in this book. Anyway, Thursday Next is a literary agent, so she is from our world, but her role is to police the literary world. So she has to go into the literary world and ensure that nothing happens to disrupt literacy, basically, or literature. So if, I don't know, pick a villain, any villain. If a villain were to leave their book and go in and start killing all of the Bennet sisters, or trying to kill the Bennet sisters, then Thursday Next would be responsible for going in and fixing that situation. So she is an law officer of the law, but she within the literary world. Told you it was confusing. Anyway, so I decided that it would be fun to invite Thursday Next because Jasper Fforde's books are very meta, and she would be kind of the bridge between all of the characters, and if she were there, then it would sort of assume that we were in the world, and so they'd potentially know each other anyway, and so she could keep the peace, but she'd know them all because she would interact with them all already. That was my thinking behind that one. I have changed my mind on this one, so I'm going to tell you who I next thought of, but I've actually since decided to take this person out and add 2 other people. So, the next person I decided was based on the fact that how Bianca actually phrased this was 2 characters from books you've read recently. So I decided that I could include a memoir, and therefore I can invite Stephen Fry, because I love Stephen Fry. I think he is so smart and incredible and erudite, and he would just be so interesting to have at a dinner party. He would know so many facts, and he would know probably so much about all the people I've invited, similar to Thursday, because he would have so much information. He's so widely read. So I love his voice, and love Stephen Fry, and I thought it would be amazing to have him, and I can kind of get away with including him because I've read one of his autobiographies. But I've since decided that that's probably a little bit cheating, so I won't do that. But also because the last person that I thought of was Juliet Ashton from the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. And I thought of her because she's just really sweet, and I think also really well read, I think also really intelligent, is always interested in people and learning about people, so I think she'd be a great dinner guest as well. Then I decided that it wouldn't entirely be fair for her to be there but not be a part of a group, because all the rest of them are with people they know. Again, except for Stephen Fry. So I'm going to swap Stephen out for Dorothy Adams, who is another main character from the Guernsey Literary and Potato Pie Society. He's good friends with Juliet, and he seems like a really lovely person, and he would be really helpful and interesting and thoughtful and kind and etc. Yeah, so taken Stephen out, and that means that all of them, except for Thursday Next, have people that match up with each other or from each other's story. Anyway, there is my fantasy dinner party guest list. Hello again. Still Future Mel, coming back to add that I have decided on the other two characters that I would invite to this fantasy dinner. So as you know from my previous insert, I decided to take Zachary and Mirabelle off my list, and now I've decided to add Mary Russell from the Mary Russell series by Laurie R. King. And the reason for that is because I actually love Mary Russell. I think she's an incredibly interesting, intelligent, thoughtful character. I think that she would be a very erudite person to have at a dinner party. I think she'd be very interesting. She'd certainly have a lot of interesting and fun, maybe not fun, but definitely some stories to tell. So Mary Russell. And then the other person that I decided on, this is a little bit tricky again. Well, like I said before, you have to think about not just who you like as a character, but who would work well in that kind of setting. So dinner party is obviously all about, you know, having a nice time and having a nice chat and enjoying each other's company. So you don't necessarily want to invite a character that you think is completely amazing and interesting, but who might not actually be that great in that setting. So I was thinking of saying Fitz from the Farseer trilogy and some of the rest of the Elderling series by Robin Hobb, but he's kind of tortured and yeah, I don't know that he would really fit in that sort of setting. So I think I won't say Fitz. Instead, I'm actually going to say Madeline from Big Little Lies by Leanne Moriarty. Now, Madeline is not necessarily the most likable character, but she is the kind of character who actually would be incredibly good to have at a dinner party. She is the kind of person who has her own dinner parties, who knows how to be in lots of different people's company, how to talk to different people who might not necessarily have the same views as her or come from the same background as her. So I think she'd fit in really well with what I have now gathered together as a very odd, quirky bunch of people. So yeah, that is my second change, and now back to the original video. So like I said, this was an idea that my friend Bianca asked me to put down and send back to her, which I'm planning on doing. So I'm going to try and get that done before I then upload this video. So she should have already received the letter from me before you guys see this video. Anyway, I thought it was a really fun thing to do, so I thought that it would be something that you guys would like, since this is a bookish channel. Who would you invite to a fantasy dinner party? Would you look for people who would be helpful at the dinner party? Would you look for people who'd be friends? Would you want to have a crazy dinner party and see if you can invite lots of bad guys so they can out bad guy each other? Or would you try and be like the mediator, so you'd invite all the people that are enemies in their books? How would you coordinate your fantasy dinner party? Comment below if you have any ideas for that. I'd love to know what you thought. I'm not going to go ahead and say I've created this as a tag, but if you like the idea of what I've just said, I will put the whole thing in the description. So I'd love to know if you decide to do a video or something like that similar to this. Please do link that below so I can go and watch it or read it or whatever it might be, if it's a blog or what have you. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed my silly little video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.